how these different teachers and principals did it. Like, it was a science teacher who got the sex ed in, and how he got around the community, and red flags, and the Christian uprising, and this and that, and what do you do? How do you deal with these people, and how do you go after them? And I was trained how to identify the resistors in my community. Absolutely. And when he said that, I thought, you asked me in the beginning, what got me going? That got me going. When you are trained to identify yourself, because I was a resistor, I thought, wow. I thought back to the people on the boat coming back on the Vietnam, the freighter from the Far East. I thought back to those people from North Vietnam and China, who had told me about identifying resistors and how members of their family were identified and how her grandfather was paraded around town with his head off. He had been a leader in town, so they paraded him around, just his body, so you could see. You don't resist. That's what happens. And so here I was being taught how to identify the resistors, the people who are smart people who know that sex ed, drug ed, decision-making, alcohol education, bullying education, critical thinking, everything that has education hanging off the end of it. Watch it. That's a red flag for any parent or anyone out there listening, because that is not traditional education. That is brainwashing. Those programs, they say they're for the good of our children. All of them are devoted to behavioral change, behavioral and attitudinal change. And basically, the purpose of them is to do exactly the opposite of what they say they're meant to do. And I have a proof of that in my book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. 700 pages of documents, chronologically arranged, starting in the late 1800s, mid-1800s, all the way through to today, basically, because George Bush is doing exactly what Clinton was doing, what Reagan really carved the ultimate agenda in stone. They've been working on it for about 100 years, but he carved it in stone when I was in the U.S. Department of Ed, and we'll get into that later. But anyway, the change agent training just scared me to death. These programs, the one I'm talking about here, was death education. The Guidance Counselors Association in Washington, D.C., at their headquarters, they publish a journal, and one of their monthly or quarterly journals was devoted to death education, which I think most parents know. The kids have to go and lie down on tombstones and go to the mortuary and study all of the global religions, for heaven's sake, don't mention Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, mysticism, whatever religion. Everybody's religion except the basic religion for the United States. And the funeral ceremonies, right? But anyway, in this particular issue, it's terribly important because this went out to all the guidance counselors across the country. It said, quote, "We in the death education movement will use death education to change the students' attitudes and values and beliefs about death and dying the same way we used sex education to change their attitudes towards sex and various sexual practices." And when I saw that, I thought, sometimes they make mistakes. I guess they never figured I was going to read that. But that was the proof, all the proof I ever needed, that these people, these change agents, their goal is to destroy traditional morality and academics. It's total, deliberate destruction of morals, academic and moral destruction. And people would say, oh, you know, that woman, she is a kook. Why would they do that? Well, it's a lot cheaper than bombers. And it's a lot less obvious. You could take a country through the schools, and they've done it. That's why you have all these people out there who don't understand you. When you try to tell them something, they're nice, they're sweet people, your friends, your neighbors, and they look at you with a glazed expression because they have been victimized, psychological warfare, and it's been played out in the schools and the media every day in your community, television, etc. But the schools basically have been, and the poor teachers have been victimized even more than the children. So anyway, I went through that training. I was appalled. I was also told to identify the important people in the community, you know, who are the head of the garden club, Rotary, Chamber of Commerce, all the people that, you know, good people. And they've been taken to the cleaners too. They think they've been doing the right thing for their, I mean, some of them are major change agents. Don't think it's just in the schools. You'll have the head of the Rotary could be a major change agent to collectivize your community, right, through sustainable development, the schools, regionalism, all of this is communism. Regionalism is communism. Good quote in my book from a leading communist who wrote in the Communist Daily World.
What exactly is regionalism?
Well, Lenin called for it. First of all, regionalism is this council form of government, which is a Soviet form of government. It means you have unelected councils. You drop the borders between the town, the county, and the state. You end up with an amorphous group, a region which doesn't represent you any longer because it's bigger. You know, it's moved out. I was the as a school board member, I was appointed to be on the vocational ed council for 4 different school districts. And I saw it there. That's probably easier for people to understand. We were a wealthy town, Camden, Maine, and we ended up paying the lion's share for all the other towns. Redistribution of wealth. Redistribution of wealth. And it's getting rid of spreading, bringing in from the countryside to this is like consolidation with the schools, bringing all the little schools into the major central school. That's what you call consolidation. Shut down all those schools out there where the children are closer to their parents. The parents can go to the school board meetings, etc. It's making government very distant from the voter or the citizen, very distant. He no longer really has much of a say because it's been watered down through the big council form of government where they bring everybody into the council system and the little boards just go by the way. It's going on all over the country now. But anyway, this communist writer in my book, he said, the United States is moving too slowly towards regionalism. It worked so well in the Soviet Union. Oh, that's a good quote. And I mean, there's so much on regionalism, wonderful work that's been done by Americans through the years. Arch Roberts did magnificent work, Colonel Arch Roberts, many, many others. On my new website, AmericanDeception.com, there's so much on there in regard to regionalism. Don Bell, he did a whole series of fantastic newsletters. Don Bell was a journalist in World War II who was in a Japanese concentration camp, came back to the United States, wrote newsletters up until 10 years ago. Most magnificent work you've ever seen. Well, on my website you have his series of fabulous articles on regionalism. And Maureen Heaton's The Impossible Dream, incredible book, is also on that website. But anyway, that's exactly what we were looking at in our community, where the leadership of these groups Many of them were deliberate, and many of them were definitely change agents. Others perhaps not, maybe not Garden Club, Historical Society, but they were being used. I was, as a change agent, had to go to them and say, well, you know, we